Good morning, everybody, both here in presence at the Sea Base in Berlin and all of you watching this press briefing, this event via our live stream. Before we start, some technical remarks. We will first start here with a brief round of questions and answers on the panel before I leave the floor to your questions here in the audience in presence and in the stream. And my colleagues will pass on the questions. Good morning. My name is Christian Mier. I'm the director of Reporters Without Borders here in Germany, and we at Reporters Without Borders working on surveillance since many years. And exactly 1 year ago, on July 18th, 2021, a huge investigation by international media network led by Forbidden Stories in cooperation with Amnesty International revealed that the phones of tens of thousands of politicians, human rights activists and journalists had potentially been hacked using the Pegasus spyware developed by the Israeli cyber arms company NSO Group. The list of phone numbers included those of more than 200 journalists. On this first anniversary of the revelations at Reporters Without Borders, we want to look back this morning here in the Sea Base at the Pegasus investigations and to take stock of the legal steps taken so far and the measures we are calling on politicians to implement. But moreover, from RSF's side, we want to present today our new digital security lab aimed at helping journalists who fear they are being targeted by digital surveillance because of their work. With the Digital Security Lab, we can finally provide an adequate response to the many requests for help we receive from journalists all over the world who fear that they are being spied on or have become targets of other forms of digital attacks. For us at Reporters Without Borders, I have to say somehow we weren't really surprised last year by the Pegasus revelations, as we have been working on export regulations for surveillance technology since many years and declared the NSO company a predator of the internet already some years ago. So it was not really, to that extent, NSO Group was not actually a surprise or a suspect. In Germany, we filed as well a criminal complaint against the German surveillance company Finn Fischer. Into all this, we now want to dig a bit deeper here on the panel. With me here on the panel are, from the left, Benjamin Güldenring, the project manager of the Digital Security Lab at Reporters Without Borders, based here in Berlin, where the Digital Security Lab will be run by him and his team. Going to Antoine Bernard, he's a director of advocacy and assistance at Reporters Without Borders headquarters in Paris. You just came from Paris yesterday evening, and you are a coordinator of a complaint coordinated by RSF following the Pegasus revelations. And there's Sevinch Abbasova, who is a journalist from Azerbaijan, from Baku, whose name was unfortunately on a list of persons monitored by Pegasus, and she's a co-plaintiff of the complaint I already mentioned. You're based in Baku, and you just arrived for this press briefing from Baku, so very warm welcome. And here's Hannes Munzinger. Hannes, he actually has today his first working day in his new position, and he's a journalist from Paper Trail Media, Der Spiegel, and there you have your first working day starting your new job with this press briefing. Very happy to have you here with us. And you previously worked with the Süddeutsche Zeitung, where actually you worked in one of the project teams that exposed the Pegasus surveillance scandal. Hannes, I want to start with you. I remember that I met in spring last year, one of your colleagues who wanted to check my phone number without explaining me further details at that stage. It was under some conspiring conditions. I did not know what you were working on. You just wanted to know my phone number. So how long did the investigation take since your team got the first information, and how many of these meetings you and your colleagues had?
Oh, I think there were like hundreds of these meetings, but yeah, when we got access to this huge list that later became known as the Pegasus project, I think it was last year in April or something, when we were invited by Forbidden Stories, this investigative organization in Paris, to join the effort to do the research into this list. And this list were phone numbers of potential targets. So what we had to do was to find out, to find proof that there were actual infections with Pegasus, because the information we had were only that these were potential targets. So what we ended up doing was contacting people that we probably already knew, that we had worked with, that we had access to, and get in touch and ask them the question, which is pretty hard to ask a journalist, can we have access to your phone, or even a lawyer or an activist, because they all have their secret sources, their secret contacts, people that are in danger if connections become public. And so we had to find actual infections on these phones, because that was what was needed, that you don't have a suspicion, but the actual proof.
And actually, can you explain us, I mean, when you realize
And of course, you can imagine that you are being under surveillance. You can imagine that colleagues you work with in other countries are under surveillance. But if you have the proof right in front of your eyes, it's just different. And when we had this list, we of course looked at the phone numbers from different countries. And I was especially interested in Azerbaijan, because I had worked on all these Azerbaijan-related political influence stories, like German politicians being basically bribed, and so I looked at Azerbaijan numbers and found some names with colleagues together, and we found your name, obviously. We found the name of our colleague Khadija Ismailova, whom a lot of us knew before and had worked with before, and we started to thinking, okay, this comes really close to us when the colleagues we work with are under surveillance. And even if you have the suspicion that you are under surveillance, it's different if you have the proof. Yeah.
And I mean, you already mentioned Azerbaijan, a country which we at RSF work a lot on since many years. But how actually did you find Savin's number? I mean, how can one imagine this?
You know, a lot of us just compared their own contacts with the numbers we had, and there are databases, public databases on phone numbers, and we try to get every possible resource to identify the people behind these numbers. And then if you have names, you can contact these people. And we had people like from OCCRP, Miranda Patrucic. She came and looked at these numbers and just told us, oh, that's my friend. I worked with her. I had her in my teaching course and so on. And so we very fast found a lot of people that we already knew and could get in contact with.
And now, 1 year after the Pegasus project, did you yourself, working as an investigative journalist, still working with secret sources, did you somehow change your way of working, without going into details, of course, but I mean, do you protect yourself differently against digital surveillance, against cyber surveillance by spyware like Pegasus?
A little, yeah. So we did our protections before, but of course during the research we learned how to check these phones ourselves, and we learned we met people who, like Benjamin, who are very good at this and can help us. And I started to just do these regular checks, looking for software like Pegasus on my phone. Yeah.
Okay. Sevinch, you have been last year here in Berlin a guest at the time of Reporters Without Borders. When you learned that you have been a victim of actually basically the Pegasus surveillance, what was your first reaction when you learned that you are, that you have been spied on with Pegasus?
Yeah. Last year, I was in Berlin as a part of the scholarship program Reporters Without Borders, and my colleagues from Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, they contacted with me and said that we should meet, and they came to Berlin. During the meeting, they said that we have bad news for you, and we should take your phone and check it, because we have information that the government backed your phone. And then IT person checked my phone and found this Pegasus program. And he said that they tapped your phone since 2019. Yes, it's the time when the government lifted my travel ban. I had travel ban from 2015 until 2019. And then 2019, the European Court get decision that it's illegal. And then the government lifted this travel ban. But then they started tapped my phone. And they said that with this program, the government could access to your contacts, and they can record audio and video, get your private photos and videos, and also get an information about your location using GPS, all of this information. And I was shocked, and I felt awful. I always aware that the government listened to my phone calls, but I never imagined that they use this program and get all of this information from my phone. Yeah, and I concerned my sources, who don't want that the government know that they were in touch with me. And also I concerned my colleagues from Maidan TV, who don't want that the government know about them, that they work for us. And I think that they, during this time, since 2019, they have all of information about us and all contacts, all our sources, and the people who work for us.
Yeah. I mean, you already mentioned that you, for almost 4 years, you have been under travel ban from Azerbaijan before it has been lifted due to European Court decision. So you have been, I mean, somehow this is a kind of compliment that you being a successful journalist revealing actually the crimes, the corruption of the Azeri regime. So after actually the travel ban has been lifted in 2019, I mean, just to get an idea how surveillance feels if one does not really know living here in Germany, where we of course as well experience surveillance, but on a different scale. So could you explain, did from 2019, apart from what has been revealed last year, did anything change for you?
Since the last year?
No, since 2019.
Since 2019. No.
So have you been then, to ask the question in 2000, when last year the revelation was, you said that you were shocked.
Yeah.
But so were you shocked more by actually the dimension of actually the scandal, or actually by the fact as such that you have been spied?
I was shocked because I know that 5 persons from Maidan TV, they also their phones also tapped since 2019, and I am curious about my colleagues, about my sources, because when the people sent me about the important information about some topics, that I get that I promise that they never knew about his or her name and about this information. But now that I know that it can be published, and the government can know about these persons, about this information before we publish this news.
Sometimes, I mean, what we know about the surveillance technology, that it's sometimes challenging actually to trace actually who actually put the spyware on a certain device. Do you have any idea out of the investigations from last year? I mean, there are of course suspicions who actually spied on you.
NCO,
a bit more concrete.
The NCO group, NCO company said that they sell this program only to find out the criminals, and but our government used this program to get our information. And they said that we only sold this program to security services, to the governments. I think that it's our security services.
Yeah, that gives an idea who is actually behind. And I mean, last year's revelation, do you protect yourself differently since the Pegasus project came out last year?
Mm-hmm. About how I secure my information. Yes, the 1 month I check my phone and get information about that. That I didn't find the Pegasus program yet in my phone. But I'm not sure that they don't want to continue this surveillance.
Yeah. Okay. Antoine, I mean, RSF has been working for many years on the unlawful surveillance of journalists all over the world. So since many years, RSF regularly declares certain companies, certain governments as predators of the internet, as predators of press freedom, which very often are the same people, the same organizations. And NSO, as I said, earlier, I mean, has been declared a predator of the internet some years ago already. So the NSO group has not been something new for RSF. So what RSF did right after the revelations came out last year, can you explain it a bit?
Yes, with pleasure, and thank you very much for this panel and this invitation in Berlin. The Pegasus scandal a year ago was new in the sense of the scale and how much it has shown that journalists were specifically targeted. Other categories, human rights defenders, etc., of course, but more than 200 journalists out of 50,000 names, that is really a pattern. And we could fear, and experience has shown in the past year, that it's only the tip of the iceberg. So there's something special without at RSF to be done about it. There are two ways of answering to this. One is strengthening our protective capacities, by training, by research and analysis, and by digital answers. But I mean by that, from the help desk to the DSL, the Digital Security Lab, a whole set of training and resource sharing online, until the Collateral Freedom Project, which for us is a solution to help unblock blocked websites, like we've been doing with on Russia with Deutsche Welle, or with Medusa, and 50 websites concerning 20 countries, 10 of them about Russia recently. That's a technical solution and helping strengthen capacity. But the other way is to fight back. We cannot, we think, leave this unanswered. We need truth, we need justice, and we need accountability. And this meant for us putting together elements for criminal lawsuits, criminal complaints, trying to back up efforts with colleagues in different countries where an appropriate, independent legal system and criminal proceedings could be tried. And different efforts have been done in the world, running up to today, and it's tough with many obstacles. We found in France such a possibility to file a complaint, which we did with the prosecutor, altogether with 25 plaintiffs from 10 countries, including Sevinch, indeed, and many others from 10 countries, and we filed altogether 5 complaints to the French prosecutor. The first one on 20 July last year, then on 5 August, then on 24 September, and then on 22 December, with journalists originating from France, Morocco, Azerbaijan, Spain, Hungary, India, Togo, Mexico, Rwanda, and Belgium. Now, this means that a prosecutorial investigation has been developing since in the past year, but we considered at the end of 21 that maybe this was not going fast enough, and we decided to resort to another possibility by French law, which is a special filing which triggers automatically the designation of an investigating judge, which we did, and the decision was taken a few weeks, 2 weeks ago, to indeed nominate such an investigating judge. And now that we will have what we call a judicial investigation, not anymore a prosecutorial investigation happening, which means for us, RSF, as a civil party, the possibility to access the investigation file, know what is in the file, what is not, and trigger the judge for further investigating act that would be missing. So it's a new step in the judicial investigation that is opening as of now, and of course we will be using it as much as possible. I have to specify, though, on this judicial move that the French judge has jurisdiction first over French citizens or dual nationals, and this is how we've triggered the initial complaints. Yet, we decided and offered journalist colleagues from different other countries to actually file complaints together with us, to be within the investigation and maybe help contribute to truth-seeking and establishing facts. And this is what we'll be doing. So we'll see with the judge how this continues. That's on the judicial front. To my knowledge, other judicial efforts have been launched, including in Israel, in India, and in Hungary in particular, but with tremendous difficulties, and I expect that path open in France will help going as far as possible in the next month.
Thanks, Antoine, for giving us an overview as well of the current state of the complaints. I mean, one part behind is actually behind the revelations on the Pegasus project is the lack of regulation. I mean, we have an EU dual-use regulation, which RSF has been criticizing and I mean, we advocated for a tougher regulation. And what we learned that actually at least 2 EU regulation authority granted export licenses, Bulgaria and Cyprus, for Pegasus software. So we see actually that this regulation regime is not really, looks not very efficient or not really working. So what does Reporters Without Borders expect from, policymakers with regard to a more efficient regulation in order to prevent this? Because one thing is fighting back, but of course we are working for, we don't want to repeat this again.
Absolutely, that's the second path to be followed on and pushed. And today, on the occasion of the first anniversary, it's a very important occasion to reiterate that we are asking for 3 very concrete asks, in particular to the European Union. 1, to have NSO on the sanction list, the blacklist, like Washington did a few months ago, and that's a very simple way to proceed. It should have been done, it has to be done. The second ask is for a moratorium on such surveillance material export, a moratorium pending updated regulation. And that moratorium is a global ask that RSF has been pushing very high, but we've been pushing it very high with a coalition of NGOs, including Amnesty, Citizen Lab, Access Now, and many others. Today, we need to reiterate it. This ask remains high. It's not to be forgotten because the news are rolling on. No, it's very concrete. It's here on the table. And the third ask is indeed for an updated regulation. And in particular, taking into account how complex the current regulation is. It was updated last year. It's based on what is called the Wassenaar arrangement. I won't enter into details, but what could be and should be consistently done, in particular by the EU right now, is put in place 2 things. 1, a requirement of transparency by states on exports. That very simply, some say annual, we would say quarterly reports about what is being done, what are the requests to purchase, what is being actually sold and supplied. Just transparency. The requirement of transparency has to prevail over the alleged security needs that covers up that type of system where the case has shown how much security is an alibi for undue surveillance, rights violation, intrusion, in particular, into journalistic work. The second basic requirement is a due diligence compulsory obligation on companies. Just this. Due diligence compulsory requirements also means reporting, but more than that. If it's compulsory, it has to mean accountability for failure to prevent rights violation. That looks like a kind of easy way out or soft recipe due diligence on companies, but the fact is it is being resorted to more and more in other EU legislative frameworks, including, for instance, the Digital Services Act that was just adopted. And the fines or penalties for violating this type of obligation can be very high if indeed legislators do decide. So that's our very strong recommendation reiterated today on the occasion of the first anniversary.
Okay, thanks, Antoine. Benjamin. At Reporters Without Borders, I mean, since many years we assist journalists. We have assistance departments in Paris and Berlin where we provide very practical assistance for journalists under pressure, under threat, with legal assistance, in the worst case helping people out of the country, going into exile. And since many years we receive reports by journalists directing to our assistance department when they have dubious happenings on their devices, and this has been always an ask which we're not able always to address to direct in an adequate way, and sometimes in the most efficient way, because we saw a need, but but already before actually the Pegasus project, you have been working, and we decided actually to develop the digital security lab. And I mean, given the fact actually that we have been now working a year actually in setting up the procedures, tells you in the audience how complex is setting up something like the digital security lab, which is now part from today on of our assistance department. Benjamin, you are heading actually our digital security lab, and you have been working on the preparation of the digital security lab already before the Pegasus project came out. So what meant the Pegasus project for your work?
So, sorry. So the first thing I think the biggest impact in the beginning was to have a glimpse at, or have an idea of the scope that this problem probably has in practice. As you said, I think we're seeing only the tip of the iceberg. But I think that's the first thing that the Pegasus revelations told us, is how important this kind of work actually is. And the second thing, and that's quite practical, along with the technical analysis that was published in the Pegasus project, so that Amnesty Tech wrote, together with this technical documentation, they also revealed the tools that they're using, the MVT mobile verification toolkit. And that actually made our job a lot easier setting everything up. Because so big thanks to Amnesty Tech at this point, because that's like a big step in our toolkit.
I mean, all of us, we are not engineers, not computer engineers. You are a computer engineer. You know actually how the surveillance works in detail, actually the technicalities of the whole thing, which we have been shocked about. You personally knowing the technical details, knowing how this kind of software works in detail, what is the code actually behind you, you're able to understand the code, in fact. Were you surprised by the scope, by the dimension, by the effects of the Pegasus project last year?
Not that much, to be honest. I mean, so MC Tech and Citizen Lab have been publishing about these things for quite some years. And from the purely technical side of things, it's just a piece of software that does something that I don't like. There are dozens of pieces of software on our phones that do things that we don't like. It's just that this particular piece of software is putting it to the extreme, so to say. I think what surprised me more is about the professionality of the kind of attacks that have been happening, and about all the engineering that went into making these attacks so successful, and to be able to scale that so high to so many people without anyone actually noticing that something bad is happening. I think that's what's most surprising, and it's at the same time it's also the most shocking thing, because when we realize that there's so much engineering effort put into making these attacks so stealthy, then we can also see how much work they are actually putting into this, and this equates also to the amount of money that they're probably making and that they're willing to spend in order to make these attacks so stealthy. I think that's the biggest part, because at the end it's not like this one particular piece of technology. Technology always has to change and has to adapt. It's about all the people working on this technology and pushing that even more forward. I think that's the point.
Yes, thanks. And from today on, the Digital Security Lab starts working officially, based here at Reporters Without Borders in Berlin. But can you explain it now to get a bit more concrete, what you and your team for the Digital Security Lab at Reporters Without Borders will do? What does a Digital Security Lab does?
Well, on the highest level, I think...
and maybe what it doesn't as well.
So on the highest level, I think I can tell that we are investigating digital attacks on journalists. That's like the highest level. But I think the most pressing thing, and the reason why we're here, is we are helping journalists to check their devices for malware infections. Or at least we're trying to help them in this way. And so what we are not doing is like your regular, well, first of all, the regular help desk work. So if something on your device just isn't working right, that's obviously something that we are not the best people to just ask for general advice. But what we're also not doing, or at least what the lab is not doing, is like giving digital security training. That's not our first priority. Our first priority is investigating and checking devices.
Mm. So who can address then the Digital Security Lab?
So basically every journalist that has who has a reasonable suspicion of being surveilled due to their journalistic work can get in touch with us. So if, for example, to give an example of a journalist that would not fall under our mandate, if someone who fears to being surveilled by their spouses, for example. That might be a case where I'd like to help personally, but it's not like that wouldn't be part of our mandate as RSF. But everyone who's working as a journalist or something similar to a journalist that we would be supporting and is fearing that he or she might be under surveillance due to her or journalistic work, this person can get in touch with us.
Mm. And I mean, you and your team of the Digital Security Lab are based in Berlin, but do I have to be personally to come to Berlin? Because, I mean, Reporters Without Borders is working globally. Of course, we do some work in Germany, but how does it work? Does everybody has to come to Berlin, to our Reporters Without Borders office? Can you explain it a bit more in detail practically?
Yeah. So, of course, everything would be easier if everyone would be able to be in Berlin and to hand us over devices so that we can do it in person. That would, of course, be the easiest way to do it. But, of course, that's not scalable, so we can't do that for everyone. So we do have certain ways on how to help check devices remotely. One example is we can set up things like a VPN in order to investigate network traffic, in order to detect anything suspicious going on there. But there are also other ways on how we can help remotely. And we are also quite flexible in this. So we are always, I mean, it always depends on the particular person and on the particular case. In some cases, there are different cases require different solutions, and we are a little bit creative there.
Okay, yes, thanks, Benjamin, for this explanation. And yeah, we at Reporters Without Borders really hope that we are closing a gap among existing offers, and we really hope that this actually enriches our assistance work. And before I now turn to questions from the audience, both in the stream and here in present at the Seabase, I just briefly want to thank those who made the digital security financially possible, which is important as well because everything costs money. And RSF Germany is an organization which mostly is funded by private donations. And therefore, I want to thank you for their digital security lab financial support, especially to Götz Meuser. And not to forget MySci, Sustainable Impact Wealth Management, and the German Postcode Lottery. And now I'm happy to take up questions from either from the audience here in presence or from the stream. Are there any questions? Here, and then my dear colleague Lotte comes with a mic to you. And if you could briefly introduce yourself, both here in presence and in the stream as well.
Hello, my name is Lennart Mühlenmeier. I'm from golem.de. You just said you want to fill a gap. And I think Citizen Lab was founded 20 years ago and Amnesty Tech 5 years ago. How do you want to fill that gap with the Digital Security Lab? Yeah, the question is to both of you, Mr. Guldring and Mr. Mir. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think from my point, I think it's less of a gap that we're filling. It's more of like adding something to the community and to everyone who's already doing this kind of work. But as far as I'm understanding, it's an area where at this point there can't be too many people working on the same kind of things. It's more about the collaboration and more about having more manpower doing the same kind of things. I mean, if I compare it to like the business world, there are a lot of security companies who do similar kind of things, and so I don't know if there are already enough on the business side of things, enough companies offering this. But I think on the human rights, on the journalistic side of things, I think at this point there is not enough yet. I think we can still have a few more.
Yeah, just adding to this, I mean, Reporters Without Borders is a global brand with a high trustworthiness amongst journalists in the journalistic community. We just, of course, I mean, as Benjamin said, it's a collaborative approach. It's nothing exclusive, but of course, we specifically target journalists where we gain lots of trust, and that's why I think exactly I would just want to underline. I mean, there can't be. I mean, it's not enough, and that's why actually for an offer specifically for journalists, this is, I think, what the gap is about. Yeah.
Hi, Patrick Boyd from Der Spiegel. Another question for Benjamin. How many devices do you think do you have to examine in a year? How many journalists do you think will try to contact you?
That's a good question. I think ask me again in a year. I have really no idea on the amount of requests that we will receive. To be honest, I would have to pick any number. I know that there have been a lot of requests after the Pegasus revelations to Amnesty Tech, but again, I also don't know any numbers there. I think we will actually have to see, and if we are overwhelmed, then we will have to think about scaling our side of things. I'm sorry.
Just a follow-up question. How many devices could you realistically examine in any amount of time? Let's say a week, a month.
Well, let's say in a week. Let's say devices are based in Berlin, so it's easy to pick them up. So I'd say then something like 10 devices should be possible. I mean, it really depends on the depths of an investigation. I mean, it really depends how or what indicators I do have that require me to dig deeper. I mean, I can do like the simple checks, like using the tool that Amnesty Tech has published, and that would probably take me, if I'm being careful, only just using that tool takes me maybe 1, 2, 3 hours. It depends on the phone, of course. But if I'm doing like a very deep investigation because I have like the feeling or a really strong suspicion that there is something, then I could also be working quite a few weeks just on one device. So it's hard to tell, and it really depends on the case. So the number 10 is, I think, something that if I don't have a strong suspicion, if I'm having a very, very strong suspicion, I think maybe one case every 1 or 2 months.
But just to add on this, I mean, the idea more than 1 year ago to set up the digital security tip came out of actually the demands we received. And so, I mean, I expect this, given the further digitalization of the world, and I expect this department to grow, I have to say. That's what actually it's the midterm plan. I would be surprised if it would not further develop, but it's not something, for us it's not a project, but it's from now on a permanent offer within our assistance department.
And our advocacy department.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
our
this
advocacy
could be,
department too.
I mean, this could be, of course, I mean, just to adding to the fighting back approach, I mean, I would be surprised. I mean, it could be a side effect if we find further dirty stuff on any devices, which we could use for further litigation, taking more judicial proceedings. But this is something which could happen. Yeah. Yeah, Hannes?
Maybe just one thing from my side about the question before. Today there was a new revelation coming from the Pegasus project about a Belgian activist. And the colleagues who did the story confronted the Rwandan government, who is under suspicion to hack this activist. And the Rwandan government said, we don't have Pegasus, we don't use Pegasus. So there are still governments bluntly denying that they have Pegasus, that they use it. There's NSO who still denies that their technology is being misused. So it's very important from my point of view that there are as much as possible organizations who have the experts who can actually find the forensic proof of these infections to make them available for reporting and for the legal proceedings.
Yeah, and as NSO Group at Pegasus is only one of the companies
yes,
we have been dealing with practically and legally. Yeah. Further questions here in the audience, in the stream, in the back? Lotte?
Okay. Hi, I'm Claudio from Security Lab at Amnesty. Firstly, I want to say I'm happy to hear this, and I think the more the merrier. There's never enough people, and if anything, there's a bit of help on these things. My question is how much have you thought yet of kind of the balancing between providing assistance versus kind of research and publishing? Like, where are you seeing yourself moving on at the point where you're kind of bootstrapped and started off in this?
I could briefly address this question. I mean, we very consciously decided to put this within our assistance department, and we had an internal discussions whether to put it closer to our advocacy department, to our legal team, but we very consciously decided to connect it first directly to our assistance department. But I mean, we're gonna see. We're gonna see, but of course we expect developments which could make us rethink this. Antoine, do you want to add something?
No, I mean, we need to start to launch, including increased articulation with colleagues, and thank you for being here. But it can open many ways, many tracks, many roads, publication and litigation, absolutely. But we surely need to break more the silos of silence. And enter into that world, and that for me the DSL will help increase our capacity to do that.
Any further questions here from the audience? In the stream? No further questions. We could take some time. Lotte? Yeah.
Yeah, hello. I'm Lotte Lalois, working in the press team of RSF, and if I may, I would like to ask something to Sevinch. So, what did you change in your private life after you heard about the surveillance? Did it have... you don't have to tell, it's a very private question, but I mean, did it have repercussions until your private life that you may want to share? Because I imagine you work professionally as a journalist and you abide to all the security rules as a journalist, but I imagine you may have had repercussions for your private life as well.
Yes, of course. This and the program, when they published it, and not only me, all my colleagues care about their private life also, because the government always use this for blaming, blackmailing journalists. And I'm caring about it. I don't have any idea what they have, but it's not only impact our private life and also our professional life, and that's it.
Thanks. Any further questions here in the room, in the stream? Nope. I mean, we planned for an hour, so we still have some more time, but if not, or if you have any direct questions in the aftermath of our event, you can of course have all the possibility to direct the questions directly. So if there aren't any further questions here, I would like to thank you, all of you up here on the panel, and all of you are available afterwards. All of us are available for further comments afterwards, for further statements, and I want to include into this as well my colleague Helene, who's there in the back, who's actually policy-wise in our advocacy department dealing with the regulation side of such kind of technology, so there in the back. So she's available as well for any detailed question on the regulation part. And last but not least, I want to thank all of you for your interest in our work in the Digital Security Lab. And I would like to ask you to spread the word and to use actually the offer we would like to offer you, the journalistic community, as Reporters Without Borders. And I, last but not least, want to thank our great communications teams who made happen today's event, especially my colleague Sylvie, our head of communications, and my colleagues, our desk office and the comms team, Raimon, Lotte, and Christopher, and of course to the Seabase for having us today. And with this, I would like to close today's event, and thank you very much.